Elliot, hello, you're up next.
Hey Bart, how's it going?
Pretty good, man. You got a hand for us?
I do. It's a 10, 20, 40 hand from Lucky Chances.
Ah, another Bay Area club. This is a not a normal game at Lucky Chances, is it?
It's not, no, I've only seen it going a few times, but there was a very wealthy individual that the game seemed to be built around on this evening.
Yeah. Okay. So by the way, I don't know if you caught the last call. Not that this type of shenanigans would go on in 10, 20, 40, but sounds to me like you're a regular California player, Elliot. What can you comment on shenanigans in California card rooms?
I mean, people do lots of little dumb
Yeah.
angles, but like you said, usually the type of players that are doing that are losing players that
Right.
you want in the game.
You
So
don't make a big deal about it.
you don't make a big deal about it unless it's something really egregious, and
Right. That's a
it
pretty
just
good
kind of is what it is. Yep.
It's a pretty good take. All right, so 10, 20, 40 lucky chances, effective stacks.
Yep. I'm 10K deep with the main villain, and there's also a short stack that'll come into play here.
Okay.
So starts off, there's a couple folds, and then the main villain, who's a very solid professional, probably the toughest player in the game, opens to 140
From where?
from mid position.
All right, so MP to 140. Okay. Is that about the standard open size?
Yeah, anywhere from 120 to 140 has kind of been standard.
Yeah.
Then the cutoff, who's the short stack, is all in for 560 total.
So cut off all in for 560. Okay.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's clearly a recreational. I don't think he needs a huge
Right.
hand. I haven't played with him, but I was under the impression he kind of knew the pro and, knew he might not be super tight in this spot. So I gave him, a reasonably strong range, but he doesn't need, aces, kings, ace, king, anything like that.
Right. Right. I mean, it's kind of full. It's pretty hard for someone to open to 140 and then fold the 560 all in at a 10-20 format. The guy's going to be. It should be a strong hand, but sometimes people just go with it. Right. Okay. So 560 all in. Yep.
And then Hero is in the small blind with ace of diamonds, queen of hearts.
So hero in small blind with ace of diamonds, queen of hearts. Seems like a spot where you'd like to. I guess again, it's kind of a two-edged sword, right? Like when someone's playing this short, this shallow, and hasn't rebought, the chances are they're not a good player. This is why I said it's very, very. It would be actually. It's very, very profitable to play a good short stack in live no limit because people splash around so much. The issue though is you make more money playing deep, so you would never really have a good short stacker because you'd wonder how ace queen would do if this guy should always be tight when he's jamming. But it seems like a spot in this dynamic where you probably wouldn't mind taking the overlay and trying to get it all in with the cutoff guy.
That was my thinking. I
Yeah.
mean, I kind of assumed if I re-raise here that MP will probably fold, and then we'd have 140 dead from his open, and
Right.
then another 60 from the two blinds. So it seemed like a decent overlay. Um, I ended up making it 1,000 just because my main. I'm mostly just trying to get the MP out, so I didn't feel like I needed to make a big four bet here.
Well, yeah, you're almost like kind of almost like min clicking it up, right? I mean, the you could in theory because it goes from 540 to it goes from 140 to 560, so it's a $420 raise. You could make it, I guess, as little as 980, but I see what you're saying. And it's kind of a interesting little spot because it's like, well, you're making it 1,000, and obviously you're never really light here. So the pro should know that because there's going to be a showdown, right? But then the question then is, can he play like leveling wars with you? And he knows you're not light, so if he puts the extra bet in, wow, well, what happens? He can get ace queen to fold, right? If you know, okay,
So both of the big blind and the straddle end up folding,
mm-hmm.
and then the MP, the solid pro, ends up making the call.
He calls. Interesting. All right, well, and that might be a situation where maybe in this situation, I might, you're always supposed to put in like I said, the last bet. Well, you guys are very deep too. You're always supposed to put in the last bet. with aces and really, really strong hands. I could just see a scenario like this where if I'm your opponent, I actually might call with some strong hands that I might four bet otherwise in a normal situation because of this sort of all in dynamic, and it's just so, so strong. So take
That's
that
what I
for
was
what it's
thinking
worth.
too. I mean, I was giving him a really strong range at this point, like
Yeah.
probably something along the lines of tens plus, maybe ace queen suited, ace king off, just because I have to be very strong making that four bet in that spot, I think.
Right. All right. So 2580 ish, something like that. Maybe 2600, something like that to the flop.
Yeah, we've got like a main pot. I've got it at 1740, so that's the three way,
Uh huh.
and then a side pot of 880.
Okay. Side of 880. Okay.
So the flop comes, it's the queen of spades, eight of spades, five of hearts.
So you flop top pair.
Yep.
Yep.
And here's where I started to get a little unsure about bet sizing, because most of the money is still in the main pot, but now we have the kind of small
Side
side
pot.
pot going.
Right.
And I feel like my range in this spot is, really, again, still quite strong. So I ended up betting 500, which is a little over half pot into the side pot and kind of more like a 20% bet into the overall pot.
I was gonna say like it's probably a small bet, or we don't usually talk about this. You might actually check for some kind of like pot. The reason why sometimes it's a check is because it's like one of these hands that's whenever you're in a situation where the bluffing frequencies go down, right? I actually think you need to have a hand that is slightly stronger than a normal situation to get value from, right? If we were to say like we're in a hand and there's no bluffing frequency, so whatever the situation is, this guy bets, right? And because there's no bluffing frequency, he has to sort of have a hand that's actually stronger than normal because the guy that's going to call him knows there's no bluffing frequency, right? Now, obviously, it's the flop, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with your 500, but that's how I approach sometimes these. These are a little bit unorthodox spots, right?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking along the same lines, and that's why I don't know. I also wasn't quite sure what constituted a small bet, given that there's two pots to
There's
consider.
two bet,
So
right? Now, with that being said, if this guy continues, which I assume he is, since we wouldn't have a call, now, now they're very, and people get lost on this. Now, you are building a side pot up, so now there becomes more and more value. I know that there was 800 in on the side, but if you sort of like imagine, say the guy was all in for 1,000 or something, you know what I'm saying? Like say that there was no side pot whatsoever. That's what I'm talking about when if there's no bluffing frequency, you actually need to have a stronger hand to value bet because your opponent, it's your opponent can't really bluff catch you if there's no bluffing frequency, right? So, okay, so you bet 500. Okay, yep. All right, so MB calls. All right, so now we're at 1,800 on the side, right? Still 1740 in the main. All right. Okay.
all right. So the turn comes out the ace of spades.
Ace of spades. So puts out the front door spade draw, but you make top two. Yep.
And I was thinking, I actually don't know if either of us really ever has a flush in this spot since the turn is the ace of spades. Um, like, I just can't see either of us getting to this point with king jack of spades or something, given how tight the preflop configuration was.
Well, it's weird because it's a small three bet, and then but the guy's all in, but then it's a four bet. But in essence, you're going from 140 to 1,000. So it's like, if you're looking at this in big blinds, it's like 3.5 to like 25.
Right.
And he'd have to call 860 more, but you guys are 10k effective, but it is close to 10% of effective stacks. So maybe some suited broadways. Like I mean, what would he do with like king queen suited? I know it's not relevant on this one because the queen's out there, but you know, king queen
Yeah, I
suited.
mean, in the moment, I was assuming he would probably fold those just because they're not doing great against a four bet. Obviously, if it was a different configuration where he three bet and I four
Mm,
bet, and he
mm,
has to just call like the 2.5x or whatever,
sure.
it would be different. But to cold call again, my assumption was he's probably got tens plus, ace king off, ace queen suited, that type
Well,
of
if you
pretty
don't,
compressed range.
yeah, if you don't think he has really a ton of suited hands, right, and you're blocking aces and you're blocking pocket queens, and um, there's probably I think probably value would be had here on turn just because if he has a spade in his hand and you size small enough, he'll call you. Whereas if you just check, he'll probably just check it back, and then maybe you just lose the value out. But you said he's like a one of the best players, so sometimes good players can give you fits. I tend to agree with you because of the interesting setup. There's probably few suited hands that he holds. So for that reason, I wouldn't mind a bet here again.
And so that's what I do. I end up betting 1,000, so it's you know about half pot again into the side pot
Yep.
and another kind of 30-ish% bet into the overall pot.
Right. So it's about like the total pot size is like 35. So you're betting like 1,000. You're right. It's kind of weird to think about the way these things go down. I think maybe you can bet a little bit larger though. If you just took a look at the side and combined the main, like what's one third, like 1,200, 12 to 1,500, something like that.
Yep.
No.
Yeah, in retrospect, I think I do like a slightly larger bet,
Mm-hmm.
but anyway, he ends up making the call.
He calls. All right. So he calls. And now we've got again, we still have 1740 in the main. And now the side has been built up to 3,800. And this is what I'm talking about here, where now there is value here. So 5,500 total. Queen five, queen eight, five, two spades turns the ace of spades. Okay.
All right, and now the river is the 10 of spades.
10 of spades. So puts a four flush out there. And one of the other things too here is that I assume you're gonna check. That's the only thing that can make sense here. Just looking at this, if you're playing high stakes, right? I assume you checked at the end. Okay, all right. So let's talk about it. So one of the other things about this too is I don't know what's gonna happen, but again, probably because it's a call, we're probably gonna be thinking about like what speed does this guy have? Do we have something to bluff catch? It's not the it's not the standard bluff catch though. You're actually getting slightly worse pot odds because of the random spade that you could lose to for the main. Although the side is going to be built up though too. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the side pot is, a good chunk bigger than the main pot. But yeah, that was also kind of running through my head. So MP, I check, and then MP ends up betting 3,000.
Well, what could he possibly get here with that he feels like he would need to turn into a bluff here that doesn't contain a spade in it?
Yeah, so I was trying to think, do the basic value combos versus bluff combos. So I actually started with value combos. Um, so the ones I
Jacks,
could come up with,
jacks with a spade.
jacks with a
Yep.
spade, kings with a spade,
Yep.
and then maybe ace king offsuit with the king of spades calls the flop.
Let me ask you this question though, because you sized down so much on the flop, okay? So you bet 500 into what in essence was, again, we said it was 1740 in the main, 800, so it's 2,500 total, right? So it's a 1/5 pot. So he's got to continue with any pocket pair with a spade in it. Maybe not deuces and threes, but maybe like fours. Excuse me, like sixes, sevens, nines. All those hands, right? It's a little bit
Yeah,
weird because
I really just didn't imagine he had those hands though
pre.
pre-flop, given that it kind of is this weird, open raise to four bet type of scenario.
Well, just let's say that he does have some sevens plus here. Okay, so he has to call the flop, even though it's kind of weird because there's another guy in there. And now on the turn, The turn, so going to the turn, there's 3,500, right? 3,500, and you only bet 1,000. So now, you know, sevens, nines, forget about jacks and kings. We know those are calling, right, with a spade, but do sevens, nines, if he's ever in there with sixes, do those hands, call? Of course, you're probably not going to see a value bet like this anyways. I'm just kind of thinking out loud the combo, right? I mean, if he got here with nines with the spade in it, what is he trying to get value from here, which would be what, the king of spades, the jack, I mean, excuse me, what is he trying to get value from? Because he's only losing to the king of spades and the jack of spades, which is very unlikely that you really hold. Because, like, how would you have the jack of spades here as played too? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, like if I had pocket jacks with the jack of spades, I would
maybe you put
probably
out,
bet the
yeah,
flop.
you're gonna continue with the lead, right? Yeah,
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 I'm not sure if I would have bet that on the turn. I
yeah.
mean, I think I probably wouldn't.
I just, but how does he get here with the spade? So he says kings and jacks, but what else does he need to turn into a bluff though? What does he need to turn into a bluff here that gets like this? If you say he's a good player, forget about the straight draws, right? He shouldn't have any offsuit hands here really, besides high cards, like not jack 10 off, right? The jack of spades. And then he should never have hands like 6-7, 9-10 off shouldn't be there either. Because it's just like I'm trying to think about like hands that might like run into like one spade that were like straight draw. You know what I'm saying? But you're saying he should never really have any of those hands. So it's kind of hard for me. So then he would really have to be turning something into a bluff, and
Yeah, and I was
he'd have
thinking
to
like
peel the flop.
if he peeled the flop, because if he viewed it as like a 20% bet, does he peel the flop with like, I mean, something like ace king of hearts with the backdoor flush draw, or maybe even a different ace king offsuit? I'm not sure.
Ace king, right? Ace king of hearts, right, with the back door, and then he feels like he needs to. He need ace king with the king of spades, right? Ace king with the king of spades. That would make some sense. Ace king with the king of spades. Well, of course, yeah, and then that makes the nuts. We're talking about bluff. Sorry, I'm just saying what that feels. Yeah, let me think. What else here? Somebody in the live chat said he's only representing king with the king of spades. He's only representing a hand with the king of spades in it. Um, I don't know, like jacks here. It's interesting. I mean, I think when I get checked too, jacks the second nuts becomes a value bet. But the real issue though is that it's so hard for the caller to have a spade in here. So 3,000 into 55 is a little bit odd for sizing. Yeah, it's a really interesting one. But again, ace king. So ace king of hearts, right? Which is ace king with the back door. Would there be anything else here? I mean, it really shouldn't be any other ace king, and of course the king of spades. The king of spades gets there, so and also you're getting slightly less pot odds. I'm just really really struggling to find the bluff here. You'd have to go really deep in the weeds, you know.
The the other
Yeah,
thing I was struggling with is I don't know if the way I've played this hand, I ever have a flush. Uh,
yeah.
so then I
It
wasn't
is
sure.
impossible. I mean that's the other thing though too is that again as played. Yeah, I mean, you could have jacks with the jack of spades, as we talked about, but we don't know if you would bet it. Somebody in the live chat said, too, he found one. Kings, no spade. How about kings, no spade? That's an
Yeah, that
interesting
was
one.
one that ran through my head. Red
Yeah.
Kings, which maybe because it was such a small bet on the turn, he is calling one time to
I don't
fold.
know if kings, no spade is even supposed to call the turn, though. That, I mean, even for like one, you bet 1,000 into 30, what, 35? I mean, in such a tight configuration, is kings, no spade really supposed to call the turn? I mean, it's especially with another guy in there. Yeah, I would. I'd have to really, really go in the weeds here for this one to make this call because it would have to be one of these ones where and he would have to find that bluff too. So, what ended up happening here?
I did end up making the fold,
Okay,
and then so he wins the
side.
side
Yeah.
pot, and then the all-in player turns up black fours, which is good enough for the main pot.
So, did you ever find out what he had? Wait.
Not at the time, but I did. I know him,
Well, wait
so
a
I
minute, wait a
texted
minute.
him.
So wait a minute. So Black Forest wins the main pot, right? So there's no way. So you had the best hand then, right? Like you can't not have the best hand.
Unless, I mean, at the time, I was wondering, like, would he value bet a set of aces? Because the way I played it, I can't really have a flush. I wasn't. I really wasn't sure. But I did end up texting him afterwards, since we were going to be on the call today, and he said he did turn a red ace king into a bluff.
So was it Ace King of Hearts then?
No, it sounded like it was ace king offsuit.
Wow, Ace King. Well, you bet so small on the flop. So it was, you went 500. What did you say? You went 500 into 500 into 2,500. But the guy behind, though, boy, I mean, it is two overcards. It is two overcards, and you went so small that maybe that's a continue. But again, it's a very, very tight configuration. Obviously, Ace King of Hearts makes a lot of sense. I think Kings and Ace King of Hearts make the most sense. And again, the question is, does Kings call your turn bet? Obviously, if Ace King of Hearts would call, and then probably would have to bluff. So you're sort of definitely going into the weeds. And I think what the person in the chat was sort of referencing why it's kind of strange is if you don't really have a spade here, the sizing is really very, very peculiar here as well, right? But you're not getting as many pot odds as it looks. It's 3,000 to win 68. Oh, I mean, obviously the other guy, you could still have the other guy beaten here too, but you lose sometimes on the side. But that's definitely an interesting one.
Yeah, yeah, it was an interesting one.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the call.